All right, welcome everyone. Thanks everyone for coming. This is a great turnout. This is a bit most we've had since the pandemic, so this is awesome. Well, is it because of ChatGPT or is it because of Mike?
We want to be Mike.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that.
Replace our job.
Well,
Assuming you can hear me.
Oh, not loud enough.
well, I'll turn it around and I'll turn up the volume more. All right, so a couple quick slides and I'm going to turn it over to Mike. One, I want to thank our sponsors. One of these days, I'll actually remember to change that from Modus because it's not Modus anymore. I keep on forgetting. Actually, he's not even here, so he doesn't know. Yeah, and I keep on forgetting to change their logo. So they provide space, and then Tech Systems provides the food. So thank you for those two. Some upcoming events, sort of in the region. Unfortunately, there's no Copalooza this year. It will be back next year. But a week and a half is JavaScript and Friends up in Columbus. So if you have interest in JavaScript, that's the primary focus there. Actually, I'll be talking about leadership there because I'm one of the friends, I guess. I'm definitely not there to talk about JavaScript. That's not something you want me to talk about. The next week you have DevUp obviously, Mike will be at DevUp. Yeah, DevUp.
Sorry. It's a great conference, but I will not be there, but go.
Oh, yeah, he will not be there. Yeah, so that is a great conference. It's actually St. Charles, but that's just right next to St. Louis. In early December, you got the Atlanta Developers Conference. That's a free event, so that's a good one to go to. DevSpace is back this year. They've been out for the last couple of years. That's in Huntsville. And then all the way in November, and much further away is Tech Bash. Like I say, I know I won't be the only one there because Arissa's also speaking there. Actually, I'll be doing a couple of sessions and a workshop there. So, and one last reminder, after Mike's session, we'll head over to BJ's. Anyone who wants to join, just to hang out, and chill, and talk more about how ChatGPT is going to take over all our jobs or not going to take over our jobs. We'll figure that out. All right. So, sure enough, today's topic is ChatGPT for developers. So I've known Mike for quite a while. Mike has been around forever. He worked for Microsoft for a long time as a speaker. It was actually his job of running events. And does a lot of other speaking events. And sure enough, I saw him in Nebraska not even a month ago. And we talked about, him coming here to speak here. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike. So let me get everything switched over here real quick.
Well, hopefully I can just do the entire screen and switch to this and everything's just going to work wonderfully. So this is where technology, when it works, is just awesome. But if it doesn't work, hey, it's Microsoft's fault. It's probably a Windows, bug in some system somewhere. So welcome. My name is Mike Benkovich. I am here to talk to you about ChatGPT and AI and developers and how do we make sense of all this? Welcome to what it is, what it could be, and whatever. If you want to email me, my email is mike@benko.com. I run a website, benkotips.com, and that's sort of the stuff that I do. Tonight we're going to talk about what is a ChatGPT, kind of like a intro. If you haven't really played with it a lot, I'm going to give you kind of an intro and dive into what is ChatGPT. My boss asked me, he said, well, you can write code. Well, what does that mean? I'm like, well, it doesn't actually write code, but it can give you code completions. We'll talk about large language models, LLMs. These are the model that makes ChatGPT work. We'll talk about copilots. We'll talk about the OpenAI service, which is a way that you can create your own service that does ChatGPT. We'll talk a little bit about prompt flow and then kind of how do you go forward from here? What is it that I can do to make the world a better place. I guess the first thing that, when I talk to people is they say, what is there about this AI thing? Should I be concerned? Is this one of those things that is like the singularity? Is it here? Do we need to care? And really, I think that ChatGPT as a large language model took a lot of people by surprise, in large part because it literally did go beyond where even Microsoft and other groups really thought it could go in providing a human-like response to things. And it made me pay attention. It made me jump into this. When Chad and I were at the MVP Summit back in March or April or whatever it was interesting because the entire conference that Microsoft put on for all these insiders was all about, hey, what does this AI mean going forward? There was, that was almost the entire focus of everything that they were talking about. In the 6 months that have happened since then, it's interesting looking around and saying, well, did everything change? Is everything different? What is it that we should be paying attention to? I think that it's probably best that we try to dive into what is ChatGPT and what do we care about and how do we really make it matter to us. When we talk about AI, we talk about some of the scenarios that are classic. How do we use artificial intelligence? Whether it's human resources, you've hired someone new. Okay, well, give them all of the training that they need based on their role. Or fraud detection. This looks a little bit odd. How do we pick up on that? How do we identify the patterns? How do we dive into the data that can give us some sort of a insight that maybe we should be paying more attention? There's a lot of scenarios where AI comes in. Customer service is a big one. Creating hey, here's a co-pilot that can go out and respond to your customers' questions or give you the best price or provide you some sort of other insight that you need. AI is there. It's a tool, but it's just a tool. It is a tool that we can use to go out and build things. And when I think of AI, I'm literally thinking of how do I have a tool that lets me go out and create and build useful things that we can go out and do something with. For instance, I do woodworking. I go out and I learned how to create different kinds of joints and whatever. And when I was a kid, we went to Williamsburg, and I thought that was really cool because we could go out and see how they build cabinets. And I was watching the guys that were doing the creation of drawers, and they were building these dovetails. And I was like, well, that looks really cool. That should be easy. So as an adult, I decided to build like a desk for my daughter. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do dovetails. And I got out my little saw and I cut away at it. And I discovered that there's a real art to this. It's actually very hard. And my dovetails didn't look like what they did at Williamsburg. And so I went to a place called Rockler, which is a woodworking store, and I bought a jig that does dovetails, uses my router. I put it on the machine, I do cut it out, and I get perfect dovetails every single time. It's awesome. The point of it is that I learned how to use this jig to be able to create a good joint when I needed it. And don't take that the wrong way. Joint being like the joint in the drawer. The reality is that knowing when to use a tool is very important, and how to use it is critical. So creating and using AI is like a dovetail jig for language, and understanding that is kind of why I put this talk together for tonight. So how do we go through and build out a dovetail jig for language? So let's dive into it. If you haven't played with AI before, what I'm going to do is I want to switch to a browser window here, And you'll see I'm logged in here. I'm logged in with AI. I'm using just a basic account. This is using the free version of AI, and I can go out and I can say, help me describe or explain what, let me type this right, explain what is ChatGPT. And it can come back and give me a bunch of responses. You'll notice that it's kind of typing a little bit slow, and it's kind of interesting. I can say create a presentation for ChatGPT for developers. And if you have a ChatGPT account, you could do the same thing. And here's my talk for tonight. You'll see that it does, hey, here's all the different things: pre-training, fine-tuning, developer integration, use cases, best practices. It basically went out and took my input and created an output for me. And it looks really great. I mean, I could say, write a morose country song about it. Notice I'm saying, write a morose, which means sad, country song about it. And I didn't even spell morose right, but it gave me a country song about doing ChatGPT. I love it. Oh, ChatGPT in the AI saloon, you're the star, you're the halloween moon. With updates ahead and ethics too, yeah, together we'll make the brighter view. You like that? I think it's kind of fun. A lot of people look at ChatGPT and they say, what is it that we can do and how does it work for me? It's a language processor. I give it an input and it gives me back an output. It's a lot like any other service. If you live in the service API economy, I send an API call and it sends me something back. And in this case, it's a large language model that is being processing my input and giving me an output. Okay. So what does that mean? What does it mean that I've got this large language model? Well, let's dive into large language models a little bit. So chatting with GPT is a large language model that is basically a prediction engine. It says, what is the most likely thing to come after the given prompt I give it? I say, hey, what can AI do for me? And it then gives me a response back. Usually it is saying something along the lines of, what do I know about the context of what you're saying? Based on the configuration that you've given me, how do I figure out what it is you're trying to say? The best thing about AI is its ability to, and then it's going out and it's going to figure out what is the most likely next word. A large language model is a prediction engine. Let's pause on that for a second. What does a prediction engine mean? If I have, for instance, a Wikipedia article about cats or dogs, and I put into it all of the words and all of the characters that are part of that, and I say, what is the most common character that is in that article? It'll give me back a list that says this is the most common character. And based on that, I could say, the most likely word about to come next is going to be learn. Predict is a little bit less, make, understand, and do are a little bit less than that. But if I were to follow through on that and say, okay, well, the most likely thing about AI is its ability to learn. And after I've said that part, then it's say learn from experience, comma, period. It is not blah, blah, blah. And if you watch the ChatGPT, what it's doing is it's basically building out these sentences a word at a time because it's a prediction engine. It's basically looking at this large language model and determining what is going to most likely come next. So based on our scenario where we have, say, the Wikipedia article about cats, if I were to take a list of all of the characters in the article and I said, give me a graph, the most likely character that is going to come is going to be the E. Maybe the T or the A is going to come next. But it's like I can see based on what is most likely, I'll be able to predict what comes next. And if you were to do this, you'd end up with something that looks a lot like what's on the screen, where you've got just a bunch of random characters. It doesn't really make any sense. It's like, it's not human-like, it's just random, but it's math. And it's basically going through and saying, based on the previous character, what's the most likely character to come next? If we were to inject, say, okay, well, based on the previous character, after a given character, what's the next character to come? I could say, give me what's likely to come the next character. For instance, if I give a Q, the most likely character to come after that is going to be a U. Okay. So we can say, how do we predict, character things? They call those 2-grams, where the first character is being an A, most likely it's going to be an R, a T, or an N. If it's a H, it's most likely going to be one of these things. If it's a T, yeah, looks like H is the most likely character to come next. And using this prediction engine, this large language model, I can go out and I can say, based on the previous 2 letters, what's the next letter to come along? But suppose we were to back it up and say, given the previous 3 letters or 4 letters, or not just 4 letters, but say 500 letters, what's the most likely to come next? We do this enough, and we end up with something that looks a lot more human-like and gives us something that looks like words. In fact, you can see here we've got Tesla, we have, Koru, and Wiet. I mean, Io Fabato, I think that's like word of the day for next week is going to be Io Fabato. But reality is that by using the prediction engine, the way the large language model works is it's basically telling us how do we complete the sentence that's given to us given the previous set of input. They call that input the prompt, the user prompt. User prompt is whatever question I'm asking it. And based on that, it comes back with, here's the likely completion for that. When you look at a large language model and you're talking about how many completions we're talking about, it is a model that is trained on 200 billion web pages, roughly, and it has the ability to pull in not just the last 10 letters or the 10 characters, but 8,000 characters, 8,000 tokens that describe out what that input was. Does that make sense? Are there questions where you're at, Chad? I assume not. So let's talk about tokenization, because understanding how this stuff works is now we're basically using a math engine to go out and do some stuff. We've got this power law of decay where we go out and we say we've got this thing called temperature, but it's using tokens, prompts and tokens to describe what is our input and how do we create an output that makes sense. If you go out to platform.openai.com/tokenizer, this is a great engine that has the ability to take an input paragraph and create a set of tokens for it. And I'm going to find, where is my cursor? Bring this up here. Can you see my screen now?
Yes. Yep.
All right. So from here, I could take a set of text and I could paste this text into here and say I've got a text like this, where I'm saying, hey, write an asteroids game in HTML about moving ships. And it's got some different things. But you'll see down below is it's actually created a token map. And the token map is important because what this is if you look at the words and the tokens are not the same thing. A word can have one or more tokens in it. Sometimes there's one, sometimes there's several. But the tokens that are sent to the engine are actually an array of numbers, an array of integers that describe what those tokens are. It sends those tokens out, it does a lookup and gives me what's the most likely thing to come next. Then based on this, it'll then respond back with some set of data. So for instance, in this case, let's write an asteroid game in HTML with moving ships, etc. If I copy that into ChatGPT and say, hey, go and do this, I get a response back that is not just giving me a description of what is this thing, but also some actual code. And being a developer, I'm like, I like code. And this is actual HTML code. Do you think this would actually work? That's what we're here to find out. So let's take this and we'll say, yeah, okay, cool. ChatGPT just wrote some code for us. It's using a model called a codex to try to reply or return back stuff for us. And so if I take a look at my GitHub, and by the way, you can go to github.com, benkotips/ChatGPT for devs. And in here, I've done a clone of this and I've got it open in my environment here. And what I've got is a basic .NET web page. And I can create a page here. We'll call it asteroids.cshtml. And being an CS HTML page, I need an @page directive. And I can paste in the content that I got from ChatGPT. Let's see if this works. That looks like real code. So if we go over here to run and debug, we are using ChatGPT to write an asteroids game for us. So it'll go out, do the build. And assuming this works, which might be a big assumption, should go out and say, determine the projects to restore. And doing the build. So it's waiting, it's processing, it says it's building. At which point, I'm trying to show off code. So coming back over here to this and saying restored. And if it would just do what it's supposed to do, which is taking my Louisville 23 ChatGPT for devs code and go out and build it. This is kind of the fun part, because have you ever done a talk where it's like, hey, I'm showing off something and it's supposed to be easy?
Is it just HTML and JavaScript?
Take that for a yes.
Does it really need to build? Open a browser and point at it?
I would think that this should just
So that would
show up and run. Let me see if I can reopen that. All right, hold on a second. And this is, by the way, the joy of having multiple monitors when you're presenting a user group meeting from home. So let's let VS Code restart here. Come up, and I've got my asteroids page. And inside of here, you can see I've got things that's designing out what the game controller is going to look like. Got my body tag. I've got my ship, my game control. At some point here, I want to be able to go over here and say run and debug. And when I do that, what I sort of expect is that VS Code is just going to start up and run. So you can see that the little patience is going across here. And hopefully, this thing is just going to start working in a second.
That's not exactly when I went to the demos and presentations where I went to.
Even Copilot is taking time to start up. This should, by the way, waiting for this thing to do what it's supposed to do. It's building. MS build, and there's our preview version. Restoring the projects, and probably because I'm running on a user group meeting tonight, it's just extra long, and that gives us the time to be able to discuss, exactly to run some code that is actually been written for me. And realistically, this has been created inside of the and using that, I provide a input and it gives me some output, sometimes code generation. It's really good at summarization, conversation, and doing some other things like that. So this is, again, one of the things we can do with ChatGPT. And here it goes. Now it's almost ready. And at this point, it should be going into running the actual code. And yeah, look at that. See how fast that is? This is the part where I'm just like, if it actually works, then I'm gonna like stand up and cheer. Loading symbols, look at this. Okay, localhost. And we go /asteroids. And look at that. There's our asteroid game. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Wow. Not quite what I wanted. The reality is that I can move my little blue ship around. Can I shoot something? Maybe, I don't know. But it looks like if I run into the asteroids, I can kill them. But reality is that it took a best attempt at creating a game for me based on the input I gave it. It's okay, it's not great. And reality is that this is, it kind of works, but I actually wanted my game to be a little bit better. So what I could do is I could say, let's hopefully try to find a better way to say what I want. How about this? Let's say create an asteroids game. Try like this, where I can allow me to shoot the asteroids with the space bar. The game ends when I shoot all the asteroids, and I want to be able to make sure that the asteroids are a different color than the background. Let's see what this thing creates. Copy the code. Is it done? Yeah. So I can say, let's try this, and we'll call this one, stop this game. We'll create a new page, we'll call it Asteroids 2. And I can paste in here the page directive, and then paste in the code. And we can say run. I'm hoping is that when I click on run, that it doesn't take like 5 minutes like last time. It's like maybe a little bit faster because it's already thought about what it needs to do. Because if all my demos are going to take this long, we're never going to get anywhere tonight, because this is very little of what we're trying to do. So hopefully the first time was the slowest, and the second time will be so much faster. What do you think? Are we cheering for it? Look at this. See how fast that was? .NET makes you want to just live the dream, doesn't it? And so we go to Asteroids 2. Oh, yeah, look at that. Doesn't do any collision, and the asteroids don't bounce off. Okay. But the idea here is that I've got AI writing code for me, and I'm using the ChatGPT engine to do work that I would have had to do as a development professional in the past. Realistically, how do I take advantage of this large language model in the environment in which I live? This is a project that I created, and I've cloned it from my repo. If you go to it, you'll see I've got a README that says, this is what it is. It's all about ChatGPT. Inside of here, I have an extension, and I've gone to the extensions for Copilot. If you do a search for Copilot, you'll see that I have ChatGPT Copilot. There's a couple of them here. One is the AI pair programmer. I've got that installed. And I have Copilot Chat, which can help me describe and basically gives me a chat interface into AI. But with these things installed, one of the cool things I can do is I can come down here. And I was talking to my boss, I was talking about how important it is to do containerization. If you're a developer, you got to be doing containerization. Everything's about Docker these days. In fact, if you can say Kubernetes in a given design conversation, it's like they're going to pay you twice as much just because Kubernetes, right? So if I say Kubernetes is great, and I say, why is Kubernetes is great? Well, Azure's great, but I could say Kubernetes is great, and I say it's great because it's great, and it's great because we can do. Notice how it's suggesting things, great things. Is great, and because it's great, we love Kubernetes, which is, whatever you want to say, but Kubernetes is just Kubernetes. I'm sorry. Let's talk about ChatGPT. ChatGPT is, what is it? It's a lot of things. But with Copilot enabled, if I were to go and show up my output, and I set my output to be ChatGPT Copilot, you'll see that there's a whole bunch of things that are going on behind the scenes. Every time I type a character, it's trying to finish the sentence that I've got. And I can say, hey, ChatGPT is a, and notice how it came back with a whole bunch of things. I found a whole bunch of inline instructions for me. It is a large language model. If I press the tab key, it accepts all of that stuff and adds it to my content, which now means that I don't have to type this in. Yeah, gosh, that seems pretty predictive, doesn't it? Maybe I don't really want all of that because it's kind of a verbose way of doing it. But I do want to be able to take advantage of tools that can make my job easier. One of the things I can do is I can say, the way we think about ChatGPT is, and then I can let it think and give me some responses. But I can also do a Control Enter, and I can say Control Enter says, hey, Copilot, give me 10 options. In which case now, instead of just giving me the one thing, it can say, here's suggestion 1, here's suggestion 2. Eventually, it'll come up with a bunch of different things. Notice over here on the right-hand side, this is my documentation that I have to write. Because my boss likes lots of documentation, I come down here where we've got suggestion 5. This is the way we think about conversational AI. 6, we like to think about ChatGPT because it's a large language model. Here's using, and here's some examples. I think that's kind of the one that I want to go with. And so I can say accept solution, and it will inject that into my documentation. So now, when I go to my boss and I say, hey, guess what? I have a document in my README that explains what is ChatGPT? Here's how to use it. Here's some examples, some examples, some examples. It's AI. Just give it up. But is that kind of cool? Is that something you could use? This is just in Markdown, let alone actually generating real code. The idea is that the large language model is able to take advantage of the internet and provide us with thoughts around, hey, here's some typical responses that you may want to include. I was doing a document about why we should do containers. It's real nice to get some thoughts and give me a starting point. Now, what I've discovered is that it's a good 80% of what I want. That last 20%, you need to be paying attention because while it may work, it may not work exactly the way we think it should work. So for instance, in my build up PS here, I've got my, how do I set up this repo? I've got my Git in it. I've got my .NET New Razor. We create the chat app, and then I create the branch and we push it, and then say, I want to say, publish to Azure. Notice it's suggesting that's where we want to go because it thinks Azure's awesome. So it says a .NET publish release, and it creates basically an output, and then it does an AZ web app up with a free SKU to a chat app called my chat app, and then I can say, let's go out and test it out. I wasn't typing any code, which is where Copilot is kind of nice in that it can go out and make recommendations on how do I want to go forward and build something. If I have code and I'm like looking at it and saying, this is kind of a bunch of stuff in here, what's going on? One of the things I can do is with my chat Copilot turned on, I can go down here and I can say, here's my extension for Copilot chat. We can say it's all set. And then from here, there actually should be a window for the chat window where I can ask it questions. And then I can say, how do I want to make this thing work? All of this is built off of that large language model, giving me suggestions, using the codex, looking at how things work. So that's kind of a start of understanding what is AI and these large language models. Let's talk for a second about how I could use this for myself. How can I integrate this into my own apps? Azure has an OpenAI service. It's part of Azure. If you go out to Azure, you can say OpenAI service. I want to create a deployment. So if I come back over here to my browser, and this is my Benkovich site. If I go here to my portal for Azure, you'll see here's Azure portal. I can create a resource, and I can say go out and create a new resource, and I can say OpenAI, and it will come back with the list of the OpenAI things. Ignore the authentication errors. And it says, here's an Azure OpenAI service. I can go out and say, create a new one. If I go through this, what I can do is I can create a deployment inside of Azure of my own model that is going to be this exact thing. So if I go down here and I say, let's put this in my shared environment, give it a name, my OpenAI service. It says has to be characters, alphanumeric. That should actually work. Set my pricing tier to be the only one that's available, standard S0. Click down here and say next. And it says, how do I want it to connect? I can set what networks, I can set all of my tags, I can set my review, and then I can create the resource. The cool thing about this is that once I've created an Azure AI service, and I've created one that is in my subscription called the shared OpenAI service, I can go out and I can interact with this service by working with different deployments that I've created within it. The way that we do this is in the OpenAI Studio, which is actually a different portal, but it's a portal that's designed for working with my OpenAI model. And inside of this portal, I can see my service plus all of the deployments that I've created. So inside of here, I've created two different deployments. I've just been playing with this a little bit. And let me make this a little bit bigger. Can you see that? So I've created a Code DaVinci, which is a codex for writing code, and I've written a Turbo, which is using the ChatGPT 3.5 Turbo model. Using the Turbo 3.5 model, I could go out and I could use this in the playground. I could edit and mess around with it. One of the things I can do is I can go to the chat environment, and I could describe how I want to work with my OpenAI model. So like down here, I could come down here and I could say, hey, let's create an asteroids game that is going to do some cool things. So if I copy this text in here and I paste it in and I say, hey, go do this, what I'll get is, here's that actual AI model. I can provide visuals and code, but I can't do things. Interesting. And if I view the raw JSON, you'll see that what I did was I sent it the system. I'm an AI assistant that helps people. Here's my role as user. Here's my prompt. Here's the prompt that I sent it. The assistant responded back saying, oh, here's my response and all the text that's part of that. The interesting thing is that you'll see that I've used 377 tokens so far. On the left-hand side, you'll see here's my assistant setup. And I can say, here's a system message that I want to include. So I'm just an AI assistant that helps people find information. I could easily change this template to something different, like say a Shakespeare writing assistant, where I want all of the output to be something that is thou and hath and uses interesting words, like wherefore art thou, Romeo, and here's some examples. And say, I go here and I say regenerate. And then we come back to, let's turn off the raw JSON. And I say, let's go here and let's paste this in. So create an S-Res game. I'm sorry, but I'm an AI person, blah, 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 but here's some code. How do I describe how large language models work? And I can send this in as a prompt. And it's taking the input and it's basically going through and saying, based on this, here's some output. Large language models, known as LMMs, are artificial intelligence systems that do online content, and they have a large corpus of stuff, et cetera, et cetera. In my system message, I say, here's how I would respond. You're a Shakespearean writing assistant that speaks in a Shakespearean style. So I would expect this to have some thous and haths within it. So if we clear the chat and start over again and say, what is the meaning of life? The age-old question. And then in here we say, always answer in rhyme. And then save this and say regenerate. And it's interesting because it's not actually doing what I thought it would do, which is to respond with a limerick or a sonnet. But the idea is that I can tell ChatGPT, the model, a bunch of input that would go into how I work with that output. And if I look at the raw JSON of what's going in, the system is saying you're a Shakespearean stuff. You should have this as your input, and that should convert into something. So then it says here, write a short text, turning down a dinner. What is the meaning of life, etc. And it says, well, I guess that's the Shakespearean part of it. But the idea is that I've got the ability to go out and create a model, and I can run with it. If you look at the view code, you'll see that in here is the actual code to be able to make a call to this. This is Python. I could also do it in C# or curl. If I look at C#, you'll see it's using the OpenAI library to do some coding and go out and work with it. One of the things that I can do is I can use this to say, go out and create a chat engine to be able to go out and work with my deployment. What I need is my key and the information about how this service works, which is inside of my OpenAI keys and endpoints. So I've got a key, I've got an endpoint, and I can go out and I can call this model if I wanted to. So for instance, not for instance, but let's go into our application here. And let's go to our landing page for my chat and go to the index page and let's say, it's great. It tells us how to build AI or apps. But suppose I want to do something where I'm going to take and fill out some chat information where basically I have an anti-forgery token. I've got a chat container. I take your input is to enter your message, which is going to be input as a text. And then when that happens, it's going to go through. And then when I get a response back, it'll update the page. In my code behind, what I'll do is I'll take the basic model here, and I'm going to go here and say my chat. And I have a on-get process that I created for this. Now, in order for this to work, I've got this .NET package I need to add, which I'll copy that and then go to a terminal window and say paste this, and this is going to go into .NET add. I'm going to say code/my chat, because that's the application I'm going to put this package into. Does a restore on that and adds my chat. Once that's happened, then I can come down here. You'll see I've got 3 things that are coming in the constructor on the index model. So I got a logger, I got some configuration. I have an HTTP client. I actually have to go into my program, CS, and after I add the Razor pages, I'm going to say builder.add or .services .add HTTP client. So I can use that, and I'm going to come back over into the actual page here where I'm going to go out and I'm going to say in the on post send message, I'm going to call the OpenAI client, which is going to have a using on the OpenAI client that goes out to use the Azure key credentials, which is using Azure to get that API key. And then it's going to basically go through and say response without stream using my Turbo 301 model. Here's my input. I'm taking the message that comes as the input here as the thing I'm saying, and I'm setting up my system prompt. I'm setting a temperature, max tokens, and some other pieces of information. And then I'm taking the completions, and I'm going to return back a JSON result that's going to be that message that is the last thing that came through. Wow, look at that. We wrote code. But it's actually working with the ChatGPT model, the Turbo 301 deployment that we created. And so if I do this, and if I did this correctly, and I go into my app settings.json and I add a couple settings here, one is going to be, what am I using here? Oh, OpenAI key and OpenAI URL. So let's copy that and go into app settings. So OpenAI key, and we'll put in the value here. And this value is going to come from Azure, where I've got this value, and I can say copy this to the clipboard. I could paste this in here and then say, here's my OpenAI URL, and then make sure I'm copying this correctly. Copy this clipboard, and I could paste this in and say, yeah, there it is. And then I could say, let's go ahead and run this. It still has an error on it somewhere. Probably don't need a comma. Let's get rid of that. So then we say, let's run this. And now I have my OpenAI service that has the Turbo 3.1 ChatGPT model. I'm going to go out and work with it and talk to it. Hopefully this is just going to work. And then when it builds, we'll see it's going out and restoring stuff, doing the other things, creating the binaries that it uses, and then spinning up and opening up a browser for us. And here's our application coming up. And here's my message. How do I explain what large language models are? Click on send, and you'll see the chatbot says you didn't provide an API key. You need to provide an API key. Oh, shoot. Okay. So, sort of worked. Apparently, my settings are missing something. So, OpenAI key. We go back up here and we say, go into this. Let's take a look and say, here's my breakpoint. Let's put a breakpoint on there. And then click through here and say, do that again. Send. Then it's going to come over here and it's going to say my API URL is set. My API key is set. I should actually have something that works. Press the F5 key. And then I should get something back. And again, we're getting the API key. So there's something in here in the bearer token that is not right, but the point of tonight is not to go out and debug bearer tokens, but to have a working demo. And this was working when I was testing it 10 minutes before I started. So at that point, I'm going to just stop and say, okay, how do we work with ChatGPT? It's an API endpoint. We can send it information, it responds back. Whatever we're doing with our Azure Key credentials was having an issue, but it should have worked. And okay. One of the things that people talk about once you have ChatGPT working and you have your model and you're able to go back and forth and work with it is this concept of prompt engineering. And prompt engineering is a way of working through how do I do injection of things that are useful to the conversation. For instance, my customer data. I might have information about, like where they've been or what's in their basket. I can use Python. I can use a bunch of different tools to be able to inject different things and be able to create some workflows on how I want this to work, and then use my large language model to process the input that came from that to give me some outputs. So the idea is that working with ChatGPT and OpenAI gives us a lot of options for how we can take advantage of AI and use it in the tools that we're using to build code. We can use ChatGPT directly from chat.openai.com. I can also use it to help me understand and fix code. And I can work with the service by deploying my own models inside of Azure. With that, I guess the question is, what do we learn? Fear not, ask better questions. How do we practice? How do we dive into this? And with that, questions, thoughts about tonight?
Any questions?
We are almost at time.
Is it going to be able to work with projects at some point?
So the question was, is it going to be able to work with projects at some point?
Is it going to be able to work with projects?
Versus a class. Right now it's spitting out single classes, but can it work on a project or solution level? When it's
So
code that it's helping you with.
for the context of the Copilot, is that what you mean? Like, is Copilot going to be able to understand the context of the entire solution?
No, I was just thinking more of just the chat, and you're asking it to help you with code, just spit out some code, or look for if a code has bugs in it, or maybe comment the code. Right now, it's literally cut and paste the code into the chat for me to see if it does something. But if you're asking it to work and look through the code for bugs, it would be nice if you could converse through references and things like that, which it doesn't seem like it's that close to. So if you're asking, particularly when people say it's going to take our jobs, it's like, well, if you can't do more than one class at a time, it's going to be pretty limited.
Right. The thing is this is a tool. It's not going to replace anyone by itself. Right. What it's going to do is it's going to make people who know how to use the tool more productive.
Right.
And so
debugging bugs, right? Search my app and look through for problems that we don't know.
One of the things I was working on recently was creating an Azure landing zone for a new workload at one of my clients. And what that means is that they get a resource group where they can create their own stuff. Create a service principal that can deploy their infrastructure as code. They write some code in Terraform. They put it into a repo. I create a workflow that takes that Terraform and does the deployment for them and then downloads the code on top of it. And it was a whole bunch of PowerShell that automated all of this stuff. And trying to figure out the syntax for the PowerShell commands to be able to do that. I'm not a PowerShell coder necessarily. So I use ChatGPT to help me figure out the syntax to be able to do all of these different individual things. Then I got done and I said, okay, ChatGPT in the Copilot, I said, reorganize my code as PowerShell functions. And it wrote beautiful code that called those functions in the right order and did things in a way that was like, wow, that's actually really pretty. It's nice. It's readable, supportable. So I deleted it, and then, being a consultant, I said, no, we need to keep this version that I created.
And is the code generated, or is it using a source that they had scrubbed previously?
So the question is the code that is it generating code, or is it using something from somewhere else?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yep.
Yes.
It's a combination of things. The Codex models, which are taking a look at code and suggesting code, are using have been trained on libraries of public repos to help me, make suggestions of code that does different things. So when I'm generating code, it feels like it's actually going out and looking at how this was done. One of the things you have to keep in mind is that this was trained on a model from at least 2 years ago. 2021, I think, is the most recent training on the model. If there's new features in React or in Vue.js or whatever that have been in the last 2 years, like Bootstrap 5, right? I'm doing a bunch of stuff with Bootstrap, and it's like I use the most current Bootstrap, and it's like it doesn't know anything about it. It's like, well, my most recent Bootstrap is 4.xxx. I'm like, no, I need 5. It's completely a different thing. So while Copilot can help you, it's not going to do it for you.
I fear the same thing I've seen with other AI models before this, is that it will give us recommended code. We'll use that code. It will regurgitate that code into its system. And in 10 years, all it will ever do is regurgitate the same code it had 10 years ago, because that's what we are being told by it to use. And therefore, it's seeing we're using it, and we'll stop moving forward. We'll just be recycling the same text.
I think that the fear that it's going to be just stuck in time is not realistic. I think we will see models come out that are going to be more and more current. ChatGPT 3 came out, and then 3.5 came out within 6 months, and then GPT-4 came out within like a month and a half or something like that. It's like the iteration time between these things coming out is getting less and less, and the newer models are trained on newer data. So the Copilot is basically using the most recent models, and I think it'll be updated as time goes by. So I don't think we're going to get stuck in time.
I mean, I understand, but in 10 years from now, if all we are doing is using by that time. Right now, it's all new code. Like I'd say, 5%, 2% of people are using ChatGPT at all, or
Right.
maybe, I don't know. But in 10 years, who knows? If we're all using it as a tool, then we're only going to be regurgitating its code. There won't be any new code.
I don't know that we're going to stop writing new code. I think there's people that are writing new code all the time.
Yeah.
This is a very new thing. I think that the thing that I come away with from the Microsoft conferences was, gosh, there's a whole lot of stuff that is so new. They don't know what it's going to look like in 3 months or 6 months or a year from now. If you had asked for anything about this a year ago, you would have gotten a kind of a boring machine learning type, talk about AI and how it can recognize, your handwriting. Okay, kind of cool, but is it groundbreaking? What's interesting is that the large language model has broken that conception, that perception that we don't need to pay attention, And I think we do. I think we do need to pay attention. I think we need to be trying to understand how it works and being. There was someone said, now is not the time for fear. That comes later. And the other one was, AI is not going to take your job. It's someone who is using AI that will take your job. So be that person.
Yeah.
So a couple questions from Twitch. So one of the questions is where do you stand on the legality of the code it generates? So is it your code? Is it your code?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. And I know that Microsoft in particular has been trying to dive deep into how they look at ownership and the legalese of code that's generated and also code that it's doing. I don't have the answer. I'm not a lawyer. I'm going to use what I can, and if it makes my job easier, that's great. But at the same time, being aware that maybe you should be asking the question is, how, is there anything that I should be paying attention to? I think that's a smart way to go. So.
Another person asked, do you think ChatGPT could be used to create prototypes by a skilled BA?
Do I think that ChatGPT could create prototypes by a skilled
business analyst?
Someone who doesn't know coding?
Yeah.
I don't know that. I think that what it gives me is the 90%. I still need to know how to do that last 10% of the using it. So a pure business analyst that doesn't know how to write code, I don't know that they're going to be able to do a lot of damage. But on the other hand, the necessity for having some of the grunt work and low-level coding, the repetitive tasks, like I'm going to go out and I'm going to create the navigation in my shared, whatever. I'm going to go out and create it's like that stuff is going to get easier and easier. And using the generators to do that. And we're already using templates and other kinds of generators to do it. So I don't know if it's that different from where we are before ChatGPT. Good question, though. Other questions?
So any other questions? Yeah.
What do you think about the implications of ChatGPT on, for example, like machine translation, interpreting other languages, that sort of thing?
Question is implications on ChatGPT translating other languages, machine learning and such.
So ChatGPT, the implications of it doing machine learning, it's going to get smarter. It's going to build on the corpus of information that's out there.
Well, I think it was more of a question of translations.
So translation, I think one of the things I've heard is that a lot of the language of coding in C# and Ruby and Python is English based. And if you're from a country that is not English based, like El Salvador or Spain, or maybe you're from a country that doesn't speak English, what I think this is going to do is open up a lot of how do I find coding examples, because the GPT model is not language specific. It will take whatever language you put into it, and it will provide likely output based on the language. And I think it will democratize how we're writing code to open up development of things in different places in a way that maybe they aren't expecting. Is that good or bad? I don't know. I hope it's good. I hope that by being on the front of this and understanding and helping people explore what ChatGPT is, that I can stay in front of that instead of getting run over by that bus. as they say, it's better to be the windshield than to be the bug.
That would be pretty cool if you open, say, a German fluent person and you open up the code and here's your German version of C#.
Mhm.
The same code, same exact code opened in English one, there's your English version.
That would be really amazing. Like we have files that say, this developer wants to see tabs as 2 spaces. This person wants Mac compatible line endings for all their files.
Mhm.
But if you could do that with language,
Mhm.
Wouldn't that be cool? Yeah,
I guess the last
really good at language.
last thing that's really running through my head, and I'm going to be talking with another group of architects and principal developers later this month or next month on ChatGPT usage in our company. And the question that really comes up is, what's the corporate, corporations are I don't know, we are kind of like, I keep hearing there's a fear of exposing our code to ChatGPT. I know that we can now turn off the history and the learning, but is there other legal issues that are keeping corporations from adopting this?
Mhm. I think there's a lot of legal questions that need to be answered and understood, and yeah, we're at the very front of all of this stuff.
Do you know of any large corporations that have embraced it as far as their developers are allowed to use it as they want?
Well, one corporation that's embraced it deeply is Microsoft, but I had an interesting conversation with a friend of mine who's
They own the model. They're not really risking it outside themselves.
Well, they own the model.
No.
No. They're just they're an investor.
Okay.
yeah.
They put a lot of money, they own
Yeah.
a large percentage of it, but
I mean, the
But they're
security,
not-
they
they're not
probably have a
controlling
little
it.
bit to do with the security control of it. Maybe. Yeah,
So-
that's what I'm saying.
Large companies that are doing this, Google, Microsoft, all of the big companies are very much aware of what's going on. I think as smaller companies, being something between say 500 billion to 1 billion in market capitalization, there's a lot of interest in trying to figure out what does this actually mean. I'm working with a couple of clients, and both of them are like aware of it and saying, well, could we do something like the Copilot for GitHub, but do a Copilot for our product, where we have customers that have needs of this, that, or the other thing, that they can use English language to ask questions and get do service tickets or fix things or whatever. I think there's a lot of interest in that, but I think it's still new enough that there's not a lot of actual street cred of doing it yet.
Awesome. Anything else? Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much. That really was a great presentation. We really appreciate your time.
Hey, I appreciate you inviting me, and I regret not being in Louisville tonight because I'm thinking it's probably, is it warm there?
Yeah.
It is warm here, yes.
Warm.
Not snowing? I come from Minnesota, where we have winter like 9 months out of the year. Summer
I
falls
would
on
say
the
it'll start
weekends.
snowing here in a couple weeks, right?
Probably. It's almost September, so yeah. Probably in the next 3-4 weeks we'll have our first snow.
See, I probably feel not really joking.
Yeah.
One of these days, Chad, I'll be there in person and we'll hang out. I would love to do that.
That'd be great. All right, I'm going to end the broadcast. So everyone on Twitch, thank you for joining. I hope you join
Thank
next
you.
month.
Thank you, everyone.